Okay, so good to be here. Today's class is going to be about Steinway, but looking at Steinway in a different way. We're using Steinway to understand German immigration in this first hour. And then in the second hour, we're going to use Steinway to look at some primary sources. And once again, the understanding of how historians turn primary sources into writing. And you're looking at the historian who did it. My book is a book based on these primary sources. So I generated a secondary source, my book on Steinway. And we're going to look at one of the documents that I looked at to write one of the pages I wrote. So that's sort of what we're going to be doing today. That may spill over into Thursday's class, but on Thursday, or certainly by next Tuesday, we will be looking at the draft riots of New York City during the Civil War, which come to the Steinway factory. And I'll be sending out questions on that. You know, I always do that. And then that's next week. We'll certainly get to the draft riots. And then if we have time, in the last class, we're going to look at the history of leisure. And Professor Weinstein, who has written on the topic specifically on Coney Island, and Professor Rosner, whose book just came out on leisure for children. If we have time, they'll come to our class and talk about their work and share a page or two from their writing. And then we'll say goodbye. So we've got this class, we've got this week and next week. I feel very sad about that. You may hear it in my voice. And as I said, there's no final exam, but all of your work is due. And please, if you have late work, get it to me because I have to hand my grades in on the 9th of June. So we have a little time to get everything done. Okay, so that is a summary of what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. Any questions before we jump into Steinway immigration questions? Anybody have any questions, comments, statements of missing me? Okay, let's get into it. Do you all have these questions that I sent out? Does anybody not have these questions on Steinway immigration? There are 2 pages, 7 questions. Everybody have that? And everybody got a handout 17A? Okay. Oh, Louis, you didn't get it or what?
Yeah, I got it.
You got it. Anybody not get the questions or the handout? All right. What's Oleg doing? Oh, those are the questions. Thank you, Oleg. And then let's go to the handout, Oleg 17A. Hi, Narissa.
Hi, Professor. Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
Nice
to
to see you as well.
Zoom with you. All right. No, 17A. Okay. This is from my book. I think it's chapter 1. Oleg, you want to scroll down? I mean, push it up so we can look at the paragraph that begins, although Heinrich had produced about 400 pianos. There it is. There it is. There it is. Stay right there. Okay. So what we're going to do is what we've done in other classes. I'm going to ask different students to do some reading. I've selected certain paragraphs which give you the quotes you'll need to answer questions 1 through 4. So while we're going through this, pick out the quotes you like. And also Professor Weinstein and I will jump in and add things as we go along. So Jason, would you like to do some reading? Jason, are you there?
Sure, I'll do some reading.
Yeah, okay, so start with although Heinrich.
Okay. Although Heinrich had produced about 400 pianos by 1848, thereby establishing himself as one of the more prosperous manufacturers in Season,
Ziesen, a small town in Germany, in the Harz Mountains. Yeah.
His economic prospects were bleak compared to the rest of of Western Europe, Germany was a poor country still subject to an oppressive feudal social order. Each of
Stop right there a minute. Let me just add to that. And for those of you taking notes, and Weinstein, you can jump in on this, but one point I want to make is that in terms of the push and pull of immigration, and you probably know this with your parents and grandparents, that the very poor from in this time period from Germany and the very, very poor from the countries that your parents or grandparents are from, the very poor don't emigrate. They don't leave. They just stay. They don't have the money. They don't have the resources. The people that move, the people that came to the United States in this time period, and I would say even today, are people with a little bit of money. They're not the very poor. They have some money so that they can make the transition. Does anybody in the class know what I'm talking about in terms of looking at their parents or their grandparents? Anybody know the story of their parents or grandparents and leaving the country of their birth and coming here?
Wait, what was that, Professor?
What's that, Carmela?
What did you ask just now?
Well, I don't know how well you know the story of your parents or your grandparents in terms of their immigrant experience.
Oh, I do.
All right, so looking at them in terms of where they were and where they from, your parents or grandparents?
My whole family is from the Philippines. My parents moved here first, and I didn't have them for like 4 years, and then I moved here like at 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, something like that.
So let me ask you this question. I'm trying to compare your parents to the Steinway family. Where did your parents fit in the Philippines in terms of social class? If you would rank them, where one is the poorest, and 10 is the wealthiest.
Okay, so family wise, like extended family, like my grandparents and my grandparents were like comfortable. I'd say like 6 or 7, and then but by ourselves, like just my mom and my dad, I would say maybe like a 5, like maybe a 4 even. But I went to private school, and I had my own nanny, and so did my brother and my cousin. Like each kid had their own nanny, but it was more normal back over there, and it didn't cost as much over
But
there.
my point, Carmela, my point is this, and when you write about Steinway, I want you to include this, that the immigrant story, although it's been popularized as wretched refuse and as these very poor immigrants that sort of come to this country, in rags and all tattered, that's a myth. That really is a myth.
Yeah, it's not.
It really isn't true. The true story, what were you saying?
Well, yeah, like they make it like when people are like, "Oh, you moved here from the Philippines," like they ask like really dumb questions. Sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, did you guys have McDonald's over there or something?" And I'm like, "Yo, it was the Philippines. Like I didn't live in a hut. Like I lived in a house with cars. Like I went to school normally. My parents had jobs. Like we're not sitting here in like old Filipino robes, like in the hut, like picking rice or something. Like we're not doing that."
Right. But what you're facing, and Weinstein, you might want to jump in on this. What you're facing is the myth of what the United States has, and in our entire education system, has placed on the immigrant stories. Stephen, you want to jump in on that?
Well, trying to look back at my own family, it's 120 years plus that the grandparents came here. It was different for Jews because they really were poor. But the poorest of the poor, I doubt it, yes. But they had certain skills that were translatable into an economic position.
And I would add that that most immigrants, Carmela's family, your family, my family on my father's side, they have a little bit of money. On a scale of 1 to 10, they hover between 5 and 7. They're not the poorest of the poor, the poorest of the poor, they don't have it they don't leave. They just stay and they can't get out. And yet the myth that's taught in the schools, the myth in the movies, the myth on TV is what Carmela's talking about is, oh, these poor people living in huts and all dirty and slovenly. And look what America has done for them. Look at this great country in terms of the prosperity. Well, I think that's not true. I think these people like Carmela's family, your family, my family, and probably their students in this Zoom that are nodding came with some skills. You know, they certainly wanted to do better, but they came with some skills and a little bit of money. Does anybody else in the class want to jump in on this to relate their own family story and how it relates to this?
Well, I would just add for myself and my family, from what I gathered, no one lived near a port of embarkation. So it took money just to get to the port where you could get the ship to come to the US. That was, you just really couldn't walk there. You had to get some form of public, you needed a train probably to get to the ports.
Yeah.
And the actual ship passage, that took more money. So it did take a fair amount of money just to be able to leave. So you're right, the poorest of the poor, they could not leave. They had no means to get out.
Tiffany, you want to jump in on this and start reading? I think we left off with, you can start with each of the 38 German states.
Each of the 38 German states had its own government, court and legal codes, its own currency, business laws, weights and measures, and tariffs at its borders. The assortment of regulations, not to mention the licenses that had to be obtained, made trade difficult, and manufacturers like Steinway sometimes had to pay 2 or 3 border taxes or river tolls to get.
Oleg, can you scroll that up a bit? Go ahead, it's up there. Go ahead, to get what?
To get their product to market or seaport. He was part of a small ailing urban manufacturing class and he knew it.
All right, so put into your own words, Tiffany, what do you think is pushing Steinway? They Americanized their name later. What do you think is pushing them out of Germany from what you just read as people in business?
Lack of business opportunities and growth.
Exactly. And what was limiting their business opportunities and growth from what you just read? What's the example you'd point to?
Tariffs, and I believe they mentioned something about taxes.
Yeah. There were regulations, there were taxes, there were tolls. Think about this, to be in business in Germany at that time, it was not a united Germany. So it'd be like if in the United States, if you wanted to move your product from New York to New Jersey, to just go from state to state, you had to pay a tax, you had to stop at a toll, there were regulations, there were different rules. And so the flow of goods was difficult for Steinway in Europe, in Germany, because of these regulations of a place that was not a unified country, but lots of small independent borders and independent communities and independent towns and independent duchies that had their own rules. And so just to ship a piano, you know, to somebody was just filled with problems. And basically, as a manufacturer, Steinway said, I don't know if I could, you know, if I stay here, it's a real pain. And so it was giving him the idea that he should get out of there. So now let's move to the paragraph, Oleg, further, this one further between 1845 and 1847, this paragraph. You're right there. Brian, you want to read for us?
Yeah, I got you.
Go.
Further, between 1845 and 1847, agricultural failures resulted in a major famine in Europe. Food prices rose by an average of 50% between 1844 and 1847, and many of the poor wandered through the countryside in search of food and coins from compassionate villagers. Although the downward spiral of the economy and rising costs of food came to a halt in the spring of 1848, enough resentment remained to bring about uprisings in Paris and later in Germany. The Revolution of 1848 failed to produce a redistribution of wealth, land, or power, but it did paralyze business throughout Central Europe, thereby encouraging businessmen like Heinrich Steinway to consider leaving.
Great. So Brian, in your own words, when I asked the question, I think it's question 1
Mhm.
of, I don't have it in front of me, but what is pushing Steinway out of Germany? From what you just read, what would be part of your answer?
You said what was pushing him out of Germany?
Yeah, from the paragraph you just read. As a guy in business, in the piano business, manufacturing pianos, as he looked at his business and he looked at the market,
Mhm.
what's pushing him out? What's making him think maybe I can do better somewhere else? What is it? What's the quote?
Well, I personally think where it says his failure to produce a redistribution of wealth, land, or power.
Okay. And how would that affect the business? How would it affect the piano business?
Well, if people didn't have wealth or money, they couldn't really purchase the product.
Great. So it's limiting the consumer market, right?
Yeah, and that's gonna negatively affect his business because he's not gonna see any.
Great. Daisy, what is there in that last sentence, the revolution of 1848, that you would lift as a quote for your answer? Daisy, you there?
Yeah, I am, but there's just a lot going on right now in the office.
Oh, I should leave you alone?
I'm sorry.
I'll leave you alone. We'll come back. Louis, you there? Louis.
Oh, yeah.
All right, look at that last sentence that Brian read, the revolution of 1848, right? Read that sentence to yourself and tell me in your own words how you would answer this question of what was pushing Steinway out of Germany. Just take a minute and read that sentence to yourself and then put it in your own words.
The revolution of 1848 failed to produce a redistribution of wealth, land, or power. All right, so I guess what pushed Steinway to leave was that like the government didn't really do much. Like the new government, the revolution didn't really do much to put the power back to the people and the wealth. So it encouraged him to like seek fortune somewhere else.
And there was no new government because the revolution failed. So if you were going to lift something from that sentence, what would you lift as your quote in terms of being a businessman and looking at Central Europe, and what would make you consider leaving?
The sentence right here, like after
what would you quote? What would be your quote for when you answered the question? What would you lift out of it? What 4 or 5 words would you lift to sort of give a reference to your point that this is one of the things that was pushing Steinway out of Europe, out of Germany?
The last sentence right here, but it did paralyze business throughout Central Europe.
Exactly. I want you to repeat it again so those taking notes can write it down, because if you're in business and you look at your market, this is the quote that proves the point. So give the entire, Louis, great job. Give the entire class the quote again.
But it did paralyze business throughout Central Europe, thereby encouraging businessmen like Heinrich Steinway to consider leaving.
There it is, folks. There it is. Weinstein, you want to jump in and add anything to that?
Well, just imagine there's a revolution going on. How can anyone conduct business?
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
economic structure is falling apart, probably.
All right, now let me, by example, give you my thoughts. I can compare this to what we just lived through with COVID, that the pandemic is a kind of revolution and something that upsets the entire economy, that shut down the economy. And so people went out of business. When you have revolution or pandemics, it's the same thing for business. It shuts down the economy. You probably saw it in your own neighborhoods. Stores closed. People went out of business. Maybe in your own families, you experienced this. So in your answers, you can travel from 1848, looking at the failed revolution and paralyzing business, thus Steinway saying, I better get out of here. And what the COVID did to New York this year. And how many people left New York? I'm getting to the point saying, what pushed people out of New York? I hope everybody comes back, but what pushed people out of New York, whether it be a revolution or disease, is a push, is a big push. And when you give me your answer, you can travel into those stores. Arbaz, you want to add to this in terms of your sense of business and the impact of revolution or COVID?
I mean, based on this paragraph, it seems like Steinway really had no choice, you know? The economy in Germany just seems to be collapsed. And if you're a half decent business owner, the first thing you do is look elsewhere, you know? Especially since most of the people in this country can't afford your product. Yeah, I mean, it seems like things just fell into place, luckily for him as well.
All right, I'd like students to quote you. So could you repeat what you just said? Because it's brilliant. So this is a quote you can use from Arbaz. So just repeat everything you said so students taking notes can get it down, because I think it's perfect.
Sure. I said, based on this paragraph, it seems like Steinway had no choice. What else? I said a lot of good stuff, didn't I? Let me see.
Home run.
Yeah, the economy had collapsed essentially in Germany. Most of the people in the country could not afford his product, and it seemed like he had no other choice but to leave. It was lucky in a sense, but only for him, I would say.
That's a great line.
Yeah.
He had no other choice but to leave. He was lucky in a sense. And I love that last phrase, but only for him. That for most immigrants and for most people, it doesn't work out. And that is another part of the American myth. You know, this myth of everybody does well and everybody comes here and raises themselves up by their own bootstraps and all of that. It's not true. I mean, he was fortunate. He was lucky. He had skills. Yes, but Carmela, you want to jump in and talk about, you mentioned that from your grandparents to your parents, the family went from a 7 or an 8 to a 5 or a 6. Am I misremembering?
No, yeah. It's when we moved here, I mean, it was like kind of a shock. I mean, we were still comfortable here, but like for example, like my brother and I came here and we were like, where's our nanny? And my mom's like, you have to learn how to make your bed. And I was like, I'm confused. I don't know what that means. I like didn't understand it, because in the Philippines we were actually like more comfortable, I would say, but like over here it's like how we have better opportunities over here.
Yes, and particularly for women, right?
I mean, just in general too, yeah, like for like my education and like the jobs and like it's the land of opportunity here, they say.
No, but I'm talking about opportunity for women in the Philippines versus opportunity for women in New York.
Yeah. In the Philippines, I mean, it's like you're a wife and then that's it, really. I mean, most of the time the husbands will work, and like if the wives are working, they usually do something small, like run a small like shop, or not shop, but like a stand, like a fruit stand or a whatever, right? Like just vending usually. And usually the men are the ones who bring home the dough. But over here, for example, my mom makes more money than my stepdad. Like my mom's a boss.
Yeah. Which I would say, and those taking notes can quote me or Carmela or both of us, that if there is truth in land of opportunity, if there's truth in the immigrant experience, it's more true for women than men. And based on Carmela just gave us an example. Does anybody else in the class want to jump in on this discussion and relate a family story or something that either says yes or no or contradicts this or supports what we're talking about? Does anybody else have a family story about what life was like for women in the land of your parents or grandparents' birth versus what life is like for you as a woman in New York?
I feel like I had it different compared to my mom.
Tell us more.
For the reason being that she actually grew up poor and we grew up all right, to be honest. She had to take care of all her siblings and she dropped out of school when she was in middle school. So as far as her education went, she was only in 8th grade when she dropped out.
And where was your mom born?
She was born in Mexico.
In Mexico. And from what when you've talked to your mom about women in Mexico and the opportunity for women in Mexico versus the opportunity for women in New York like you today, what do you come away with?
Even though she had like a really minor like background in education, she actually like hustled her way through when she came here when she was 18. And that's why she also had my brother. And like she did a lot of like skilled jobs like sewing and like factory jobs like that.
So she had some skills when she showed up?
Yeah.
I think you should write about that. Somebody should mute themselves. I can hear their kids in the background. Is that you, Oleg, or somebody? I can hear children in the background. Daisy, you got to write about that when you answer this question about Steinway and comparing your mom to the Steinway story, okay?
Yeah, well.
All right, so Daisy, now that I got your attention, can you read from, you see the, Oleg, scroll it up a little bit because I want to start with Heinrich's son. It's right there in the middle of the paragraph, you see Heinrich's son. It's right after the word Germany. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, he's putting he's thank you, Oleg. He's got his cursor on it. Can you see that, Daisy?
Yes, as Hendrik's son Charles was caught up in a rally against give me a minute.
Absolutist. A dictator, an absolutist prince. Go ahead. Daisy, did we lose you? I think we lost Daisy. Daisy, you still there? Heinrich's son, Charles. All right, Arbaz, are you still there?
Yep, you want me to start from Heinrich's son, Charles?
Yeah.
Sure. Heinrich's son Charles was caught up in this rally against an absolutist prince and in the fight for popular sovereignty and guarantees of political and civil liberties for the Christian middle class. But when it became apparent that the will of the people was not going to rule in Germany, even in liberal Brunswick, Heinrich and Julian feared reprisals for their son, nor were prospects favorable for their piano trade. So they sent Charles south to neighboring Switzerland and from there to Paris, then London, and then on to America, where he was to find a safe haven both for himself and for the Steinway piano business.
All right, so give me a summary in the Arbaz language of what's pushing the Steinway family out of Germany.
It seems based on this little passage, it seems to be more of a religious reason. The quote here, in the fight for popular sovereignty and guarantees of political and civil liberties for the Christian middle class. I didn't really think that was going to be one of the big reasons or the big factors. I find that quite interesting, considering like he's probably a decent businessman, owns like a decent amount of money, but still has to leave because of religious, would you call this religious persecution, or what would you call this?
I would call it, Weinstein, you should jump in on this too. I would call it more ideology than religion. I think the feeling that Charles had was more for liberties and equality under a dictating ruler. But Weinstein, what's your reaction to this word?
Yeah, because the words you had used were political and civil liberties. So this probably gets back to the right of the people to vote. Who are the leaders of the country going to be? Not a dictator or a hierarchical system, but more democratic. And this is why the revolutions of 1848 happened, but they failed basically. So they were looking to get out. And
But
the
in
US,
in terms of appealing, and this phrase that Arbaz is looking at, a Christian middle class, how does that fit with the ideology of liberty?
well,
Steve?
for me, everybody was a Christian there, so I don't think that's significant, really.
So you think in terms of the author who put that in, it was misleading for the readers?
Yeah, I don't know why you did it. Who wasn't Christian?
Yeah. So here we're finding something in my writing that I really is misleading, that really I should have left it as the middle class. And Charles was fighting for equality against an absolutist dictator prince. And then as you read on, Arbaz, what happens with this revolution and what Charles was fighting for?
It seems that the fight didn't work out, and that in the next sentence it says, when the will of the people was not going to rule in Germany, even liberal Brunswick, which I also like that you called it liberal as well, to help people understand that, like, okay, because when I think of liberal now, I think of like New York West Village or something, you know, like hipsters, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, going on, they said that they went to multiple different nations: Switzerland, Paris, London, and then eventually to America, where they were able to prosper the business.
So what would you say was the big push, another big push that pushes Steinway out of Germany, from what you just said?
Major political differences between the government and the people living there.
And particularly their son, right?
Yeah, particularly their son, which I also thought was interesting, that the son was the big factor in moving, not necessarily himself.
And why was he the big factor in their moving? What, just in your own words?
I mean, I'm not quite sure what the I'm guessing there's like a difference between social class here, because it says popular sovereignty, political and civil liberties. So I'm assuming rich versus poor. But I'm not quite sure what about the son, what he dislikes about this.
Well, what about the son's safety? What did you read into that? Did they have a fear about?
Oh yeah, they feared reprisals for their son since he participated in that. That's pretty big, I guess.
You know, say it again so people can quote you and take notes. When you just said that's pretty big, what do you mean by that's pretty big? Because I want others to write this down.
Well, I would assume that if you were part of this revolution or part of this dissent against the government, they would come after you. And so maybe that's what Heinrich was scared about. He didn't want any repercussion for his son and decided to quickly leave.
I think you got it A+. I think you got it A+. Those taking notes can quote Arbaz, but I think the key phrase here is on to America, where he was to find safe haven, both for himself and for the Steinway piano business. Arbaz, would you agree with that would be the key quote?
Yes, I agree 100%.
All right, you got both of us.
Also, just compare it to this week's events in Belarus, where you have an absolute dictator, and he forced down an airplane to imprison a political or newspaper columnist who expressed a desire for popular sovereignty.
Exactly.
And this is what they were capable of now, and this is what they were, in some ways, capable of then as well, even though there were no airplanes.
Exactly.
But this could happen.
So a big push that's pushing Steinway out of Germany is they were simply afraid that their son would get arrested and tortured and perhaps killed. They had to get Charles out of there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, that's question one. We have a few minutes before we take a break, so let's try to get to question two. And Joseph, are you there? Joseph, are you there? Hello. No?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't think I can talk right now, though.
What's that? You don't want to read right now? Okay. Christian, are you there? Christian.
Yes, Professor.
Can you do some reading?
Why not?
All right, why not? I love your spirit. Okay, start with in June 1849. Oleg, move it up a little bit. In June 1849, go. Christian.
Yeah, give me a second. In June 1849, Charles Steinway, I think.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Just read it though. Landed in New York.
I can't see it, Professor.
You can see it. Okay. Jonathan, you want to jump in? No. Okay. Ivan, are you there?
Yeah,
Okay.
Professor.
Okay. In June 1849, go.
Yeah. In June 1849, Charles landed in New York, center of professional music making in America and of America's piano industry. The other major piano manufacturing cities were Boston, Baltimore, and Philadelphia, all centers for German immigrants. Pianos had been in America only since the Revolution, most of them bought from shipwrecks by pirates as part of their booty. The rest were imported by John Jacob Astor, the German millionaire fur trader, who occasionally bartered furs for pianos. By 1849, there were plenty of piano makers in New York, and Charles easily found a job with Bacon and Raven, one of the largest manufacturers in the city and provider of pianos to the composer Stephen Foster.
So from what you just read, Ivan, how would you, no, Oleg, don't do that. Go back to what he was reading because we need to look at it. Go back. Oh, right there, right there. So Ivan, from what you just read, put it in your own words. We know now what was pushing the Steinway family out of Germany. What's luring them to New York?
New York is the center of professional music making in America and America's piano industry.
And so relating that to your own family story, what lured your family to the United States or to New York? What was the big attraction?
Well, my grandfather came here in the 60s, and I think he was coming here just to find a better life, to make a better life, which he ultimately did.
And what was his definition of, what would be the ticket to this better life according to your grandfather?
Owning his own business. When he first came here, he didn't come with much. I think he came here, he was like a taxi driver. He worked at the Below factory, like I told you. Then he got into tourism, like taking people on tours like to Niagara Falls and Spain, and like he was just like a tour guide. And he did that for a while.
And what was his reason for picking New York over Boston or Chicago? Why here?
Well, he's always said it's just like the center of the world, New York. I don't know if he ultimately wanted to stay here, but he knew like if he came here, it would definitely like jumpstart his dreams.
And taking that, your grandfather's story, what phrase in the paragraph you just read would he agree with?
I guess that it's the center. It's the center.
Yes. The word center is in your grandfather's story. You said it, the center of the world. And right. For Charles, he came here and he said, oh my gosh, this is the center for piano making. And some of the biggest piano making, the sense of opportunity has to do with thinking you're at the center of the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good place to network too. And
Yeah. Weinstein, you want to add to that?
Charles easily found a job. So back then, jobs were plentiful in your area of interest. There was always a need for more labor. Business was growing.
And there was
Late 1840s, this was not a time of recession in the US or in New York. So this was a good time for him to come.
so the word opportunity comes to mind, huh?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's take a break. According to my clock, it's 1:45. So let's come back at 2:00 and we'll start looking at some Steinway letters, okay? See you all at 2:00. Questions 3 and 4. The answers to those questions are on page 14 of from my book, Steinway. Hopefully do you all have that, the handout 17A? You should all have that. Oleg, you told me that if they go into breakout rooms, you can't put a document for them to share, right?
Yeah, to go group to group.
So we're going to go into breakout groups, and in your group, you'll have to pull up attachment 17A and go to page 14, because the answer to question 3 and 4 are on page 14, beginning with Charles had come from Season, and also what he didn't tell them. And Charles must have heard about the scenes of the Opera House. So those 3 paragraphs really provide you with the answers to question 3 and 4. So we're going to put you into groups of 3 or 4. In your group, I want, as a group, for you to decide which question you're going to answer. So talk to each other about whether you're going to answer question 3 or 4. And then read those paragraphs, talk to each other about the answer you're going to give, and then designate a person in your group to be the spokesperson when we come back in 15 minutes, okay? Does anybody have any questions about what we're up to? You all have questions 3 and 4, and you all should have handout 17A. Anybody have any questions before we break into groups? All right, Oleg, breakout rooms, and then we'll visit each room.
1, 2, 3. I think everybody's there.
And you still have Christian and Jonathan.
Uh-huh.
Christian and Jonathan still seem to be with, oh, there goes Christian. Now you have Jonathan.
Yeah, Janet.
Put them in a group. All right, so what we'll do is go to each group and make sure they understand the assignment, okay? Can you take both of us, or you can only take one?
One by one.
I mean, but can you take one, can you take the 2 of us, the 3 of us to each group?
Yeah, I can. I hosted. Let me try it right now. You want to go to group?
I just need to just make sure they know what the assignment is.
Yeah. You want to go to group 1 right now?
Yeah.
Okay, you have to answer it right now to join.
Oh yeah, I see that. Join breakout room. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll click on. And Brian.
Hey, Professor, I just joined back right now. Could you tell me what the assignment is?
Yeah, Brian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Professor. I actually need a note too.
Okay. Well, the assignment is to look at question 3 or 4. So you both should have those questions. And then look at page 14 of my book, which is handout 17A. And the answers to question 3 or 4 is in that page. But among the 2 of you, you should decide which question you want to answer, 3 or 4. Once you've decided that, then read that page and then talk to each other about what the answer is, and then designate one of you to be the one who reports back to the class.
All right,
Sounds great. Thank you.
All right. Okay. See you in 15 minutes.
All right.
Yep.
Okay, Oleg, let's go to the next group.
hold on. Leave break-
four.
Oh,
And then once you've decided that, you read the relevant paragraphs on page 14 of my book, which is handout 17A, and then decide which one of you is going to report back to the class in terms of your answer to question 3 or 4.
okay.
Got it.
You got it?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're not so sure, Carmela.
I'm sure. I got it.
Okay. Okay, see you. I'll see you in 12 minutes.
Okay.
Give you
14, yeah.
the answer. Okay, you got it?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, see you in about 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, just choose a question and then we're doing question 4.
All right, if you're doing question 4, then go to page 14 of my book, which is handout 17A, and you'll find in one of those paragraphs the meat of the answer to question 4. Okay?
Okay.
That's where you can
Thank
get
you,
the
Professor.
book. Okay, Daisy, you're okay with this?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, I'll see you in about 10 minutes. Who's with you? Nobody?
I think it was I, I forgot their name, but someone was here and then they left.
Oleg, you know who was supposed to be with Lewis?
What group is it? It's 5, group 5. Yeah, let me leave it.
Who's with Lewis, you know?
I cannot see. Hold on 1 second. Participant. Louis, Steven, Richard. I cannot see from here. I have to leave group.
All right, can you move Lewis to one of the other groups? A group
Yeah,
that-
yeah, I will.
All right, Lewis, we're gonna move you to a group that only has 2, okay?
Okay.
Louis up on what you've been up to. He's joining you because he lost the member of his group, okay?
We're reading, we're doing question 4. Yeah.
Okay, you good, Louis?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, Pedro, Narissa, you're good?
Yeah, we're
Yes,
good.
good, Professor.
Okay, see you in 10 minutes.
I saw in the email that you like you wrote this. You actually wrote this?
I actually wrote this book. Yeah, what do you think?
That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I wrote this book.
Yeah, you're like a legend. That's awesome.
Oh, gonna think about what you just said. It's very nice. Thank you. Yeah, this was my book that I wrote based on primary sources. And yeah, you're reading my writing.
How long did it take you to write it?
I started writing it, let's see, the book was published in 1995 and I started writing it in 1980. It took me about 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much money did you make off of it, if you don't mind me asking?
I made enough to pay for my son's college tuition, but he went to a SUNY school, so it wasn't like a private school. But I made some money, yeah, because I got a big review in the New York Times, and I was famous in Germany. I was on television. I was on the Today Show. I was on. Yeah, I made some money.
Wow, you're a legend. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so are you?
Yeah,
three
that's
working on-
that's not common, right?
No.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's
Not
like
common.
it's like that one time you showed us that video, and like he was actually in the video too. Like I was kind of like shocked. Like I didn't say anything, but like it's just kind of crazy, like to see.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered. Yeah, I became famous for a while. I was front page of the New York Times book review.
I'm gonna have to go to LaGuardia to get your autograph when everything reopens.
Okay, no problem. That'll be wonderful.
I signed for him though. You'll get my version.
Which question are you on?
4.
All right. You need my help or you're good?
So are we supposed to use both of the PDFs or just one?
For the PDF, just use 17A.
Okay.
Page 14.
Okay.
Okay. See you soon.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks for the compliment, Joseph.
Oh, yeah, no doubt, man. I'm in the presence of an icon. God, no doubt.
All right. I feel good. Oh, look, we have any more groups?
No, it's last one.
That was the last one. Oh, I didn't know Sarkar was there.
Hey, Oleg.
Yeah.
That week you were sick, I was asking for you, man. I'm glad to see that you're doing all right.
Yeah, I'm okay. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's go back to the main.
You have to click leave room button.
All right, the bottom right. I'll leave the room.
Yeah.
Sarkar, you okay?
Yeah.
All right. I just saw that you're in this group too. Okay, see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
Why is Jonathan with us in the main session, Oleg?
He never went to a group.
Jonathan, you never went to a group? Or maybe he's the one who left Lewis? Jonathan, are you there? I think he was with Lewis, and I can't hear you, Oleg.
Yeah, he was with Louis.
And he left. Okay, so in the participant list, make sure that I know that, okay? And he left class early or something. And a low battery. All right, let me plug my Mac in before I get disconnected, huh? So Joseph just realized I'm famous.
It's good to be famous.
Yep.
You're famous for a moment.
Yeah, 15 minutes of fame.
You get 15 minutes, that's about it. But it was a nice 15. I remember people coming up to me saying, "Oh, I saw you on the Today Show," and this. And were you at the archive then, or you hadn't started?
No, far away.
Yeah, this was 1995.
Yeah, far away. None of us were there.
Even Soraya wasn't there?
No.
Yeah, well, you imagine the moment when I get the book review and I see my book on the front page. Woo!
That's tremendous. That's a big honor.
They ran out of books. Yale ran out of books. The demand was so high.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. And we could pay, as I said, we paid Samuel's college tuition with it. Which was, with SUNY, it wasn't like a lot of money, but it was still money. It was,
Yeah, significant.
yes, it was good. And if you take it, divide the money over the 15 years, it was about $1 an hour.
Yeah, that's true too.
All right, so what should we do? Bring them back, they'll report in, and then you want to do the document?
So our group chose question 4.
Okay,
And I was part of group 7, I think.
you in group 7, okay. And what's your answer to question 4 for those who are taking notes and are going to answer this as one of their questions for the homework? What's your answer to question 4?
That New York had over 500,000 people. And the Broadway, the street was busy and there was like lots of traffic and stuff.
What's the quote you're going to use to describe Broadway?
He had never seen so many people at once or anything like the traffic on Broadway.
Unbelievable, right? Tiffany, where are your grandparents from?
Well, that depends because they're like very mixed. So
Well, the grandparents the grandparents that you remember, that you talked to, that you were closest with.
well, I'm close to my mom's father.
And your mom's father is from where?
He was born in the Dominican Republic.
And can you remember your mom or her father talking about what the transition was like from where in the Dominican Republic did they live?
I'm not sure, but I know that my grandfather didn't come from like a big city. He was from a small town. So New York was a very big adjustment for him.
So I'd like you to write about that when you answer this question, okay? Compare that adjustment to what Charles was going through in seeing so many people and the bustling that you just quoted, okay?
Okay.
And what else, who else was in your group, by the way?
Sarkar and Joseph.
Sarkar, you want to add to, and Joseph, you want to add to this answer, question 4, what struck you about another example of what New York City looked like or what life was like in New York City when Charles arrived?
At the time, 1849, New York was suffering cholera because people were drinking water that was mixed with sewage, and there was no good sanitation department and for the serve the people.
Did that make you think of New York today?
No, it's totally different.
Tell me more.
Yeah. And there was a lot of dead body on the guitar and some wild pigs, rats, and dogs are eating the dead body. So it was a worse condition.
Do you have a favorite quote that supports what you're talking about in terms of this New York City that was filled with pigs and dirt and dirty and disease? You have a quote from page 14 that you could share with us?
I see. It was also littered with most of the rubbish and somewhere dormitory air.
So the quote is, it was also littered with most of the rubbish and dead animals of the city?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was New York. Man, we've cleaned it up, but that was the New York that Charles arrived in. So Joseph, you want to add? Thank you, Sarkar. You want to add to this, Joseph?
I was gonna say what struck me, the specific quote is by 1849, there were plenty of piano makers in New York, and Charles easily found a job with Bacon and Raven, one of the largest manufacturers in the city and provider of pianos. And the reason why I say that shocks me is because, like, I always think of, and how we've talked about before, like New York was the place where people would bring in their products in order to distribute. I wouldn't have thought, and even, nowadays, like I don't really think of New York as like places where people, manufacture. I always think of it like this is where people bring their products in order to distribute.
So the reveal for you as a student of history is that there was a time when New York City was different, right?
Yeah, it's definitely like a contrast. Like, because
Yeah.
how we've talked about before, New York was a place to distribute and a place to like it was also a place to consume, but more like, it wasn't really like a place where I thought like there would be manufacturing going on, I guess.
All right, so Joseph, let me ask you a question. I'm going to assume you've been to the college campuses and you've been in the main building and Center 3. You've been in all the buildings of LaGuardia Community College, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, you're sitting down. You ready for this?
Yeah.
Every one of those buildings was a manufacturing building. Every one of the buildings that the college is located in made a product. They weren't making pianos, but Center 3 was the Sunshine Biscuit Factory, and they were making biscuits. And the B building was, as I remember, the home of Eveready Battery, and they were making batteries. And the main building was a truck repair center for White Motor Company. Every one of the buildings that we're in Long Island City, every one of the buildings that LaGuardia Community College is in was like Steinway in the sense that it was manufacturing a product. Do you believe that?
Yeah, that is. I believe that like because I also went to high school in like the Long Island City area, and it seems like a lot of the buildings like obviously I never like actually put thought to it, but like now that you say that, that does make a lot of sense, especially like where like LaGuardia is. There's a lot of like like by that side there's a lot of like car dealerships and a lot of like, yeah, so that does make sense that you say that.
And you ready for this? When I first started working at LaGuardia, before you were born, in 1972, next door to the college, they were still making chewing gum. It was the Adams Chiclet Factory. And the workers would come out in their lunch hour, and there'd be workers all over the street. And when I arrived to work to teach my classes, just the smell of the air, I could tell which flavor they were making that day. So I'd walk to the class like, oh, they're making spearmint today, or oh, they're making juicy fruit today. I mean, even as late as 1972, there was still manufacturing going on that block. Is that amazing to you?
Yeah, didn't that extend into the 1990s? Adams?
I think so. You're
Hey,
probably
you said chiclet, like the one that comes in the little box, like the two little squares.
Yeah. It was being made right next door. The chiclet Adams chewing gum. They were making chiclets. They were making chewing gum there. And when I started working at LaGuardia, and Weinstein's pointing out into the 1990s, they were still manufacturing right next door to the college. And across the street, not really across the street, but across Queens Boulevard was the Swingline Staple Company, and they were making staplers there. I mean, it was the center of industry. It was the center of manufacturing. So I mean, it's great in terms of looking at history, in terms of.
And the E building, certainly I can remember Equitable Bag Company, and that's why it's called the E building for Equitable.
And they were making shopping bags for Lord and Taylor and for all the department
All
stores.
the department, you would look at the bottom of the bag, would say made by Equitable Bag, Long Island City.
Yeah.
So the E building wasn't really the E building at that time.
When I started working at the college, Equitable Bag was still making bags. Yes, that's right.
So the E building was the Equitable Bag Company.
Yeah, the letter E is from Equitable, not East or anything like that. Nobody knows that now, but you all. And have any of you can you remember going inside the B building and there's a big open space in the middle of the building?
Yes.
You put a thumbs up if you remember. Just give me a thumbs up on your screens if you remember this. Okay, you ready for this? You're gonna love this. You're gonna love this. That big open lobby area was an elevator for Eveready Battery, and trains, cargo trains, cars would pull into that elevator and they could lift each car up to a floor and unload the cargo inside the train. So that big open area that you've walked into in the B building was an elevator for railroad cars. Is that unbelievable? That, I mean, I love that story. I wish I could take you there right now.
Are you joking?
What's that?
Are you joking?
About what?
Really?
I'm not, I mean, Weinstein, you're shaking your head. Do you think I'm joking?
No, definitely not.
No, it's a true story. I'm a legitimate historian and I'm giving you the word. I've studied this.
I feel so young.
Yeah, you are. Pedro, what group were you in?
I think group 6.
And which question did you do?
4.
Oh, you did 4. Do you have anything to add or do we cover it?
I don't know. I don't know if you went over this, but during that time, it didn't have a sanitation and board of health back then.
Good.
New York was a nasty place back then.
I love your words, Pedro. I love your words. And then all you have to do is give a quote from page 14 and you're all set.
It was because it didn't have the board of health and stuff. Like the water was real nasty, and it got something called you just look at the sea. It has something called
cholera.
Yeah, cholera. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And people, claiming thousands of lives because of it.
Yeah, and you know what the simple problem is with the water system that they finally figure out is you got to keep the poop separated from the water you're drinking.
Yeah.
And once you mix the urine and the feces in with the drinking water, people are going to get sick. And they had to separate the pipes. I mean, the pipes were just were polluting. They were polluting the drinking water. Steve, you want to add to that?
No, but it's just remarkable because we take it for granted now.
Yeah.
But back then they had no idea what caused diseases.
Yeah, exactly right. Okay. Narissa, thank you, Pedro. Narissa, where were you? What group were you in? And what question did you do?
I was in the same group with Pedro. We did question 4.
All right, you want to add to what Pedro said? Or you think we got it?
I think you got it, but also what I want to add is that the bodies like of the less fortunate who died of, what was it, cholera? Yeah, cholera. They couldn't be buried, so their bodies was left lying in like the gutters and being eaten by rats and dogs. That was pretty crazy.
Yes. But make sure you put that into your answer, okay? And make sure you put the phrase "that was pretty crazy" and explain to me why you had that feeling of it being so crazy. I think I get it, but just give me another sentence on that, okay?
Sure.
And
I have to admit, when I read that, scratching my head. It seems so incomprehensible to us nowadays.
Yes, but Stephen, let me say something to you about incomprehensible. Didn't you get in reading that some feeling of COVID and of people being sick all over New York and people dying and people going to hospitals and hearing the sirens in the city back a year ago? Did that stir you in any way?
It made me think of the Holocaust.
Tell me more.
Actually. Well, there people were so malnourished they were dying in the street, and their bodies were just left there.
Yeah. And this was New York in 1849. Whoa.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Ivan, what group were you in?
I was in group 3, and Christian. I was in the group of Christian, but he also brought up that it's kind of like the COVID outbreak now. What you just said, he brought that up too.
Yeah, yeah.
We had question 4. We said the same thing. You know, it was populated. It was densely populated. It was dirty, and I guess you could say it was like toxic or unhealthy because of the cholera outbreak.
Yeah, it's like nowadays.
But we're getting better.
People are just dying in the middle of the roads because of COVID-19. You don't know if you have it. If you don't have it, it's unidentified.
But it's like India today, right? I'm reading about India. That's going on in India today, and in other countries, in Brazil, India, and it was it does connect you to this history, doesn't it?
I was a connection. I was talking to my dad last night. He's in the US right now, and he told me that he spoke with family in Honduras. And he's saying that people are dying, like at least 50 people every day from COVID.
So you can get it. You and your dad can get a connection to New York in 1849.
Yeah.
Yeah. Carmela, which group were you in?
I was in a group with Ata.
All right, which question did you do?
We answered it, I think. No, we did the 4. We talked about how the dead bodies and the were in the gutters and they were being eaten by pigs and rats and dogs, and then the rich people, like they're rich but they were still dead and they were in carloads. So like that was crazy to read. That actually we answered that question, but then I was also we were also discussing how about the other question about how he was like, hey, like he didn't tell his family, you know, about any of this.
Let's move into that. Did any other group do question 3 before we move into question 3? Did anybody else in the class do question 3, or did everybody do 4?
Oh my God! Yeah, stop!
We've been invaded by the dogs.
I'm so sorry.
All right. Anybody else do question 3? Carmela's going to take us into question 3. Anybody else do question 3? All right, Carmela, take us there. Go ahead. What were you?
All right. So on question 3, it asked like what he lied about, right? I think.
Yeah.
That's what it said. Well, basically, I was mentioning how in the immigrant family story, we all did the same thing, or like they did the same thing. Like my parents and a lot of immigrant families will be like, hey, like it's dope over here, come over, and then they, you know, it's not amazing. My best friend actually was just listening in on our class just now on my FaceTime, and she then told me about her parents. She had Mexican immigrant parents, but she told me about how her dad moved over here and told her mom that everything was taken care of, that everything was good. And when her mom left and came here, her dad only had like a backpack and some clothes. Like did not tell her anything about how hard it is over here. He just was like, yeah, come over here. Everything's taken care of. We got it. And then when she came here, he didn't have anything. So they had to like, you know, start from the beginning, and their whole family in Mexico thought like, oh, they moved to America and like they're doing amazing now. But really like they had to start from like scratch. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that was going on with like the sanitation department, the dead people and like all that, right? Like that wasn't mentioned. He was just like, okay, New York's dope, come through.
And riots in the Opera House. There's also riots in the Opera House.
Like not even like just riots that were like, oh, like protests, like straight up people were dying and getting hurt from these protests. But I'm sure that he was like, oh, there's the theater here and it's super, super fun. We all watch the theater and we all just like, you know, hold hands and kumbaya at Times Square.
Okay, so now we have elements for a perfect answer, right? We have the element of the past of Charles writing these mythical letters about how great it is in New York. Meanwhile, people are dying in the streets. There's cholera everywhere. Animals are eating dead bodies. There's riots in the Opera House. None of that makes the letters. Okay, so we have the past. Then we have Carmela and her friend who listened in on the class telling us, well, wait a minute, my family did that too. All right. I mean, we have examples from Carmela, and I'm sure many of you also could relate that story. So let me get to the hard part once that's been done and ask why. I mean, now that we did the work as historians, right? We have the content, we have the details, we have the answer. But I'm going to push you now, as I've been doing all semester, to give me your opinion of why. And Narissa, I'm going to turn to you to give me your thoughts on why did Charles lie in his letters? Why can Carmela tell us this story about the mythical messages that are sent out from residents of New York who have a backpack, but yet tell the family I'm doing so well? Narissa, what's your thought on why did Charles lie? Why did Carmela's family lie in those letters? And I want your opinion.
I think it's because he still saw opportunities for like a better life here, despite like the city being dirty and the outbreak of the disease. He still saw opportunity for growth and a better life.
And is that true about your family?
Yeah, I would say so. I don't know much about their move, like why especially they move, but I think so. Because like if you ask them now if they're willing to go back home, like to our home country, they all say no.
Because of the belief that life could be better for the children?
Yeah, maybe because of that.
Ivan, you want to jump in on this and sort of give me your why the myth of life in New York? Why is it to this day, like Charles, people are still writing these letters? What's your thought?
Like why it's
why lie? Why
in New
did
York?
Charles lie? He's here. People are in the streets dying. There's rubbish everywhere. Animals are eating dead bodies. Riots.
I just think like anybody else, you just even through that, you still see opportunity. I guess I don't know. A lot of people come here and they see the silver lining despite it all. So I think being a businessman, especially, you see an opportunity for success. It's going to be hard at first, but eventually in 10 years, you'll be able to build have a stable foothold or something.
And to get personal for a minute, I'm going to push you a little, Ivan. Do you think it was personal? Do you think it's personal with immigrants that they're here, they're all by themselves, they're lonely? Do you think it's a personal thing?
No, it's for the betterment of your family.
What's that?
It's for your family. You do it for your family.
But the lying of luring people over, do you think they're trying to trick them to come over?
Oh, like they're selfish and they don't want to be alone, you mean? I guess it could be a little of that too. Yeah. Especially with Stuyvesant, with Steinway, I think we read it somewhere that he was lonely here, he didn't have many connections or friends, and it's not gonna feel like you're at home if your family isn't there. So
Weinstein, you want to jump in here?
I was just thinking also that I think it's human nature. If you see other people in horrible situations, you'll say, well, that's not me. That's them. So I'm doing okay. I'm not dying. I'm not dead in the street. I don't have cholera. I wasn't in the riots. I'm okay. So why not come over? So you don't want to mention this to discourage anybody. It's the way we sometimes think. If we see, we see people on the street every day who are in decrepit situations. It's them. It's not us. I think there's that element as well.
Yeah, maybe they like truly believe that, like some of them, I guess, some of them actually like believe that, yeah, they were okay. Even though all this stuff was happening all around them, they're like, well, yeah, like you're right. Like I laughed because you're like, I'm not dying. I don't have cholera. It's like, it's fine. Like I'm okay. Even though everybody else is, then like, I'm fine. That's like if somebody were to be like, oh, like I want to move to LA, I'd be like, yeah, dope, come to LA, right? because I'm doing okay over here. But then if you look around, like the homeless problem and everything, like there are still people living in the streets and the gutters, like all that stuff, but we don't mention that. It's the same like nowadays. So I mean,
yeah, what I like to say to people is we don't have 7 million nitwits living in New York. There's a reason we're here. They start talking about New York and the problems of New York, and I go, yeah, but we've got 7 million people who are staying here, and they're not stupid. I truly believe the same thing. Okay, so we have about 10 or 12 minutes left, so it's enough time for you each individually to pick question 3 or 4 and send me your answer to question 3 or 4, which is basically one of the questions you will not have to do for homework. This homework is due June 1st. So right now, an in-class writing assignment, pick question 3 or 4 and email me your answer to question 3 or 4. Make sure you lift a quote from page 13 or 14, that you give me the detail behind your answer, and that most importantly, I want to hear your opinion. I want to hear your why. I'm pushing you a bit on the why. So in the next 10 or 12 minutes, send me your answer, email it to me, and it'll be one of the answers that you will not have to do for homework due June 1st. Okay, anybody have any questions? Okay, get to writing and send it to me. You have till 3 o'clock. Go.